Let's start the video. Subscribe for more stories like the video and hit the bell icon. The year was 2473, and the galaxy teetered on the brink of chaos. After centuries of uneasy peace between the galactic species of the Helios Compact, a new threat had emerged from the unexplored regions of the Andromeda Rift. They called themselves the Vrexel Dominion, a brutal hive-mind species driven by conquest and destruction. Planets fell in mere days to their relentless swarms, leaving ruin in their wake. Humanity, the youngest member of the Compact, had only recently carved out its place among the stars. Viewed as resourceful but reckless by the elder species, humans were often relegated to secondary roles in the Compact's military efforts. But as the Vrexel advanced, the Compact's forces grew thin, and desperation forced a fateful decision. Every member species would be called upon to contribute their strongest warriors. On the lush training world of Phaedra Prime, Commander Leora Kane stood before the assembled recruits. The sun gleamed off her silver battle armor, and her piercing green eyes scanned the group with the intensity of a predator. Kane was a legend in the Terran Expeditionary Forces, known for her unorthodox strategies and unyielding will. She had been handpicked to lead humanity's contribution to the Compact's elite strike force, the Starlight Vanguard. The recruits, a mix of seasoned soldiers and fresh volunteers, stood in uneasy silence. Among them was Elias Vren, a lanky engineering officer who had never seen combat, and Nadia Solon, a former Martian gladiator whose reputation as a deadly fighter preceded her. There was also Arjun Malik, a quiet but fiercely intelligent strategist, and Kayla Thorne, a cybernetically enhanced operative with a mysterious past. "You've been chosen because you have something the galaxy desperately needs," Kane began, her voice carrying across the training grounds. "Humanity is still underestimated. The others think we're too young, too inexperienced, too fragile to survive out here. They see our flaws, not our strengths. But I see potential to become something greater. To prove to the galaxy that we're not just survivors. We're warriors." Kane paused, letting her words sink in. "The Compact wants soldiers to fight the Vrexel. I'm going to give them warriors forged in fire. But make no mistake, this will not be easy. Only the strongest will endure. The rest, well, let's just say this isn't the place for the faint-hearted." As Kane's speech ended, the recruits were divided into squads for their first trial. The training program was notorious for its brutal regimen, designed to push recruits beyond their physical and mental limits. Their first challenge was a live combat simulation in the Gleaming Abyss, a sprawling underground maze filled with mechanical sentinels programmed to attack without mercy. Elias found himself in a squad with Nadia, Arjun, and Kayla. As they descended into the abyss, the air grew colder, and the faint hum of machinery echoed around them. Elias nervously adjusted his pulse rifle, feeling out of place among his more experienced teammates. "You look like you're about to puke," Nadia said with a smirk, her voice crackling through the comms. "Don't worry, rookie. Just stay behind me and try not to get yourself killed." "Noted," Elias muttered, gripping his weapon tighter. The simulation began abruptly, with sentinels dropping from the ceiling and crawling out of the walls. The squad sprang into action. Nadia's plasma glaive tore through the enemy ranks with brutal efficiency, while Kayla's cybernetic reflexes allowed her to outmaneuver even the fastest sentinels. Arjun directed their movements with calm precision, identifying weak points in the sentinels' formations. Elias, however, struggled to keep up. His shots went wide, and his attempts to override a sentinel's control system ended with a near-fatal explosion. But as the battle raged on, something shifted. He began to anticipate the sentinels' movements, using his engineering expertise to disable their targeting systems. By the time the trial ended, Elias was covered in sweat and bruises but alive, and his squad had completed the simulation faster than any other group. When they emerged from the abyss, Kane was waiting. She nodded at Elias, her expression unreadable. "Not bad for your first test. But don't get comfortable. The real work hasn't even begun." As the recruits regrouped, the weight of their mission began to sink in. The Vrexel were unlike any enemy humanity had faced, and the Compact was counting on them to succeed where others had failed. For Elias, Nadia, Arjun, and Kayla, this was only the beginning. The fires of Phaedra Prime would test their limits, and shape them into the warriors humanity needed. Little did they know, their journey would take them to the edge of the galaxy and beyond, where they would uncover secrets that could change the fate of the universe itself. The days on Phaedra Prime were grueling, and the nights offered no solace. As the recruits slept in the barracks, their dreams were haunted by the weight of their mission. The first trial in the Gleaming Abyss had only been the beginning. Commander Kane's program pushed them harder each day, with fewer recruits making it to the next phase. By the second week, the recruits were introduced to the Crucible trials. These tests were designed not just to challenge their combat prowess but to uncover who had the qualities of a true leader. For humanity to prove its worth to the Compact, it wasn't enough to produce skilled soldiers. They needed minds capable of adapting to the unpredictable chaos of war. Kane stood in the holographic briefing chamber, her image projected larger than life. The recruits watched as the shimmering image of a barren desert planet appeared behind her. "This is your next trial, Chronicles 4, she said, gesturing to the desolate wasteland. "The surface is hostile, and the environment is uninhabitable for more than 72 hours without proper preparation. You'll be split into smaller teams, dropped onto the planet with limited supplies, and tasked with locating a compact beacon somewhere in the wasteland. The catch: you'll be competing against one another for the beacon. No rules, no mercy. Only one team can win." The chamber erupted into murmurs. The recruits knew the stakes were high. Failure here meant dismissal from the program. As the teams were finalized, Elias once again found himself alongside Nadia, Arjun, and Kayla. The squad's dynamic had grown stronger since the Abyss trial, but this mission was different. Leadership roles would be tested, and cracks in their unity could prove fatal. The transport shuttle dropped them onto Kralo's IV-scorched surface. The ground cracked beneath their boots, and waves of heat shimmered on the horizon. As they adjusted to the oppressive conditions, Arjun took out a datapad and scanned the area. "We're here," he said, pointing to their position on a holographic map. "The beacon is somewhere northwest, likely in one of these canyon systems. It's a 2-day trek at least, assuming we don't run into the other teams, or worse." "Worse?" Elias asked, glancing at Arjun nervously. "Unconfirmed reports of indigenous predators," Kayla said flatly, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly. "They're fast, territorial, and not something we want to fight unless absolutely necessary." Nadia adjusted the straps on her combat pack. "Great. Killer wildlife, no water, and we're supposed to beat the other teams to the finish line. Sounds like a vacation." Despite her sarcasm, tension ran high as the group began their journey. The heat made every step feel heavier, and their limited water supplies forced them to ration carefully. By the second night, the group was on edge. They had made good progress, but Arjun's map showed signs of other teams converging on the canyon. They camped in a narrow gorge, the rocky walls offering some protection from the unrelenting winds. "All right, we need a plan," Arjun said, crouching near the flickering glow of a portable lantern. "The other teams will be just as desperate as we are. If we encounter them, it won't be a friendly chat." "I say we take them head-on," Nadia suggested. "We've got the skills and we can outfight anyone if it comes down to it." "That's reckless," Kayla countered, her tone icy. "We can't afford unnecessary losses. Stealth is our best option." Elias hesitated, looking between the two. He had spent most of the mission following their lead, but now he found himself speaking up. "What if we misdirect them?" he suggested. The group turned to him, surprised. "We know they'll be heading for the beacon too," Elias continued. "What if we create a false trail, make it look like we've gone in the opposite direction? It could buy us time to get ahead." Kayla raised an eyebrow and Nadia gave a grudging nod. "It's risky, but it could work," Arjun said after a moment. With the plan agreed upon, they set to work. Kayla used her enhancements to leave false tracks leading east, while Elias rigged a small decoy beacon to emit faint signals in the wrong direction. It wasn't foolproof, but it was their best shot. The next day, as they neared the canyon's edge, the air grew thick with tension. Kayla's cybernetic sensors picked up movement ahead, another team. The opposing squad, led by a burly soldier named Draxon, had spotted them. A firefight erupted. Plasma bolts ricocheted off the rocks as Elias ducked for cover, his heart pounding. Nadia charged forward with her glaive, forcing the enemy to retreat into a choke point. Kayla provided cover fire, while Arjun coordinated their movements with calm precision. Elias, meanwhile, spotted an opportunity. While the others held the enemy at bay, he slipped through a narrow crevice, determined to reach the beacon first. When he finally emerged on the other side, the beacon stood before him, pulsing faintly. But as his hand reached out to activate it, a shadow loomed behind him. Elias froze, feeling the cold dread of realization. The predators Kayla had warned about were real, and one was watching him. The trial was far from over. Elias's breath caught as the predator emerged from the shadows. It was massive, a sleek, four-legged creature with jet-black scales that shimmered faintly in the dim light of the beacon. Its eyes, a piercing crimson, locked onto him with an almost sentient malice. A low growl rumbled from its throat, reverberating through the canyon. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, sweat dripping down his face. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew any sudden movement would provoke the beast. He glanced at the beacon just a few meters away, its soft pulses mocking him. If he failed to activate it, the entire trial, and his team's future, would be lost. Elias, report. Arjun's voice crackled through his comm. Ah, slight problem, Elias whispered, barely moving his lips. Define problem, Nadia's voice chimed in. Elias swallowed hard. I've got company. Big, sharp-teeth kind of company. Kayla's calm, clinical tone cut through the tension. Do not engage. Stay still. Predators like that are territorial but cautious. If it doesn't see you as a threat, it might retreat. Might? Elias muttered, his eyes never leaving the creature. The beast took a step closer, its claws clicking against the stone. Elias could feel its hot breath as it sniffed the air, assessing him. Slowly he began to shift his weight, inching his hand toward a flare grenade clipped to his belt. Don't even think about it, Kayla warned through the comm. I'm open to better ideas. Elias hissed. Suddenly, a burst of plasma fire echoed from the canyon behind him. The creature snarled, its attention snapping toward the sound. Elias realized the firefight between his team and Draxon's squad was still raging. The distraction was enough. Elias yanked the flare grenade free, twisted the activation knob, and hurled it toward a nearby rock. The grenade ignited mid-air, bathing the canyon in searing red light. The predator recoiled, hissing in irritation before retreating into the shadows. Beacon's clear, Elias said, his voice shaky. He lunged forward and slammed his hand onto the activation panel. The beacon emitted a deep hum, followed by a blinding flash of light that signaled their victory. But his relief was short-lived. Elias, fall back now? Arjun barked. Before Elias could respond, a plasma bolt struck the rock beside him, sending shards flying. Draxon's team had ignored the predator and circled around, determined to take the beacon by force. Nadia's voice came through the comm, sharp and urgent. We're pinned down. Get your ass back here, rookie. Elias ducked as more plasma fire rained down. He sprinted toward the crevice he had come through, heart pounding. Behind him, the sound of heavy boots grew louder. Draxon's squad wasn't giving up. As Elias emerged into the narrow canyon where his team was taking cover, the chaos was overwhelming. Nadia was locked in melee combat with one of Draxon's soldiers, her plasma glaive clashing against a combat knife. Kayla was perched on a rock, picking off enemies with precise sniper shots, while Arjun coordinated their movements with cool efficiency. Nice of you to join us, Kayla said dryly, not looking up from her scope. Beacons activated? Elias shouted. Arjun nodded. Good. Now we just have to survive until the retrieval team arrives. Easier said than done, Nadia grunted, delivering a brutal kick that sent her opponent sprawling. Draxon himself emerged from the smoke, a towering figure clad in heavy combat armor. His plasma cannon hummed ominously as he aimed it directly at Elias. Nice try, kid, Draxon sneered. But this game isn't over yet. Before Draxon could fire, Kayla's voice cut through the comm, everyone down. Now. Elias didn't hesitate. He hit the ground as a deafening roar echoed through the canyon. The predator was back, and this time it wasn't alone. A pack of the creatures burst into the clearing, their crimson eyes glowing with feral fury. Draxon's squad opened fire, but the predators were too fast. One leapt onto a soldier, its claws tearing through armor like paper. Another lunged at Draxon, forcing him to abandon his cannon and draw a blade. Fall back. Arjun ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. The team scrambled up a rocky incline, using the terrain to stay ahead of the predators. Elias slipped but felt Nadia's strong hand yank him back to his feet. Don't make me carry you, rookie, she snapped, though her tone carried a hint of grudging respect. As they reached higher ground, the predators turned their attention fully to Draxon's squad. The last thing Elias saw before they disappeared over the ridge was Draxon locked in a desperate struggle, his defiant roars echoing against the canyon walls. The retrieval team arrived shortly after, their drop ship hovering just above the ground. As the squad boarded, battered but alive, Kane's voice greeted them through the comm. Well done, recruits, she said. You've proven you can survive the crucible. But don't get too comfortable. This was just a taste of what's coming. As the ship lifted off, Elias slumped against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He had survived predators, rival squads, and the unforgiving wasteland of Kralos 4. But deep down he knew Kane was right, the real trials were yet to come. The atmosphere in the barracks was electric when the team returned to Phaedra Prime. Despite the grueling ordeal on Chronicles 4, their success in the Crucible trial had earned them a rare moment of camaraderie. Elias was beginning to feel like he belonged, though the bruises on his body and the memories of the Predator's red eyes reminded him just how high the stakes were. It wasn't long before Kane called them to the briefing chamber again. This time the room felt different. The usual holographic projections of training scenarios were absent, replaced by an imposing circular table in the center. Around it sat representatives of the Compact's elder species, veteran commanders with centuries of experience etched into their features. Kane entered the chamber, her expression unreadable. "Recruits, you've done well so far, but now it's time you understood what's truly at stake. The Compact has decided you're ready for the next stage of your training, but before we proceed, there are truths you need to hear." The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. Kane was not one to waste words, and her tone carried an unusual weight. She activated a console, and a holographic star map appeared above the table. It displayed a swath of the galaxy with several systems highlighted in red. "These are the outermost territories of the Helios Compact," Kane began. "Over the past year, the Vrexel Dominion has pushed deep into these regions. We've lost 12 systems already and billions of lives with them." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors of the Vrexel's brutality, but seeing the scale of their advance on the map made it real. "The Vanguard," Kane continued, "was created not just as a response to the Vrexel threat but because the Compact's existing forces have failed. The other species far older and more advanced than humanity, have been unable to adapt to the Vrexel's tactics. They rely too much on tradition, on strategy manuals written centuries ago. The Compact needs something new. Something unpredictable." She turned to face the recruits. "That's where you come in. Humanity is the wild card in this war. We've survived centuries of adversity by evolving, by adapting to the impossible. The Vanguard isn't just another strike force, it's humanity's chance to prove that we're not just passengers in the Compact. We're leaders." As Kane's words sank in, Arjun raised his hand. "Commander, if humanity's adaptability is our strength, why involve the Compact's older species in the Vanguard's creation?" Kane's lips twitched into a small smile. "Because even humanity has limits, Arjun. The Vanguard is more than just raw potential, it's the synthesis of the Compact's finest. Advanced technologies, centuries of battle data, and yes, the instincts that only humanity can bring to the table." She gestured toward the hologram again, this time zooming in on a specific star system labeled Pixis 87. "Your next mission will test you in ways that even Chronicles 4 couldn't." Pixis 87 was once a thriving research outpost studying the properties of dark matter. 3 weeks ago the outpost went dark. "We suspect a Vrexel incursion, but we've received no direct confirmation. Your task is to investigate the station, secure any survivors and extract critical research data. That data could hold the key to understanding the Vrexel's hive mind, and how to disrupt it." The recruits were silent as the weight of the mission settled over them. For the first time, they weren't being thrown into a controlled simulation or a training exercise. This was a real mission with real consequences. As the meeting concluded, Kane pulled Elias aside. Her piercing green eyes studied him for a long moment. "You showed initiative on Chronicles 4, she said. "That's good. But this mission will demand more than clever thinking. You'll need to trust your instincts, and your team. There's no room for hesitation." Elias nodded, though doubt churned in his stomach. He still felt like the weakest link in the squad, especially compared to warriors like Nadia and Kayla. Later, as the squad prepared for deployment, Nadia clapped him on the back. "You're getting the hang of this, rookie," she said with a grin. "But don't get cocky. Pixis 87 isn't going to be a walk in the park." Kayla, ever the pragmatist, was busy checking her equipment. "The Vrexel don't play by the same rules as the Sentinels in the Abyss or the other squads on Chronicles 4. If they're there, we'll be stepping into a nightmare." Arjun looked up from his datapad, his expression calm but serious. "Then we'll need to be ready for anything. If the research data is as important as Kane says, we won't just be fighting for survival, we'll be fighting for the future of the war." As the squad boarded the sleek, compact dropship that would take them to Pixis 87, Elias felt the familiar mix of fear and determination building inside him. The stakes were higher than ever, and the galaxy's expectations weighed heavily on his shoulders. As the dropship launched into the star-speckled void, one thought echoed in his mind. This isn't just about humanity proving itself. It's about ensuring the galaxy survives to see another sunrise. Little did they know what awaited them on Pixis 87 would push them to the brink, and reveal secrets that could shatter everything they believed about the Vrexel, the Compact, and humanity's place in the stars. The journey to Pixis 87 was long and silent. The dropship, a sleek and armored vessel capable of withstanding the harshest environments, hummed steadily through the void. Elias could hear the soft whir of Kayla's cybernetic enhancements as she tinkered with her equipment, while Arjun pored over the mission briefing one more time. Nadia, always restless, stared out the window, her eyes scanning the stars like they were a threat waiting to happen. The mission was clear. Investigate the abandoned research outpost, secure any survivors, and retrieve the research data, particularly anything related to dark matter that might give humanity an advantage against the Vrexel. The rest of the galaxy had failed to detect anything unusual about the Vrexel before they struck. Humanity's unpredictability, their adaptability, was their best hope for discovering the one weakness that could turn the tide. Elias tried to push away the gnawing doubt in his gut. This was their first mission for real, not a drill or a simulation. Real lives, real danger. The risks felt more immediate now. Kayla broke the silence. We'll be landing soon. I'm running a diagnostic sweep of our equipment. We can't afford any surprises once we're on the surface. Elias nodded, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. It wasn't the kind of fear that paralyzed him, but the kind that sharpened his senses, forcing him to focus. What do we know about the outpost? Nothing good, Nadia muttered, her voice tinged with sarcasm. Pixis 87 went silent 3 weeks ago, and the Vrexel don't leave anything alive if they're involved. Arjun looked up from his data pad, his expression thoughtful. The station was conducting research on dark matter, nothing about the Vrexel, no defensive forces. It wasn't prepared for an invasion. We might be dealing with the aftermath of a massacre. Kayla's cybernetic eye flared momentarily. It'll be a ghost town then. Just the way I like it. Stay focused, Kane's voice suddenly crackled through the comm, sharp and commanding. You're approaching the landing site now. The outpost's automated systems are still active. Use caution. The dropship lurched as it entered the atmosphere of Pixis 87's barren moon. The surface was a jagged wasteland, with craters and rocky outcroppings strewn about like the remnants of some ancient war. As the ship descended, a large, domed structure came into view, the research station. The once pristine white exterior was now scarred, with scorch marks and signs of structural damage. Land in the north docking bay, Kane instructed, her voice tight. The primary data vault is there. You have your orders. Keep your heads on straight. The landing was rougher than expected. A gust of wind and a sudden tremor shook the dropship as it touched down. The doors hissed open and the squad disembarked, weapons raised. The cold air hit Elias like a punch to the gut. Eyes sharp, Arjun ordered, scanning the surroundings. We don't know what we're walking into. The docking bay was eerily quiet. The faint hum of the station's emergency lights illuminated the metallic walls, but there was no sign of movement. Nadia led the way, her glaive glinting under the harsh lights as she stepped over debris. Looks like the Vrexel were here, she muttered, kicking aside a piece of metal. I've seen this kind of carnage before. This station didn't go down without a fight. Elias, who had been quiet until now, felt the weight of her words settle over him. He hadn't seen the kind of destruction Nadia was talking about, but he could feel it in his bones. The Vrexel left nothing behind. They were a swarm of consuming hunger, wiping out everything in their path. The group moved deeper into the station, following the narrow corridors that led toward the main data vault. The walls were lined with shattered consoles and broken glass. Strange scorch marks adorned the floor, as if something had burned its way through the metal. Kayla knelt by a pile of broken equipment, her fingers hovering over the scorched remains of a console. These were definitely made by the Vrexel, she muttered. They have a way of completely disintegrating any tech they can't use. Arjun looked at the wreckage. If they couldn't use the research data, they would have destroyed it completely. We need to keep moving. The deeper they went, the more the station seemed to feel like a tomb. Empty rooms, twisted corridors, and eerie silence stretched on endlessly. No signs of life, just the faint buzz of malfunctioning lights and the hum of the station's failing power grid. Something's wrong, Kayla said suddenly, her voice low. What do you mean? Nadia asked, her glaive at the ready. There are no bodies. If the Vrexel attacked, they would have left corpses. Nothing to scavenge, just bodies, Kayla explained. But there's nothing here. It's like they were never here at all. Elias felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. What if they're still here? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't like it, Nadia muttered. Keep your eyes peeled. We're not alone. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the station. A clang from somewhere up ahead, followed by a distant screech. Then another, closer this time. The sound of something dragging itself across the floor. Move! Arjun shouted. The squad sprinted down the hallway toward the data vault, but as they rounded the corner they stopped dead in their tracks. In the middle of the room stood a figure, shrouded in shadows. The faint outline of a human silhouette, its features obscured by grime and smoke. It wasn't moving. Elias's pulse quickened. Who is that? The figure finally spoke, its voice low and raspy. You shouldn't have come. Before anyone could react, a strange, guttural noise reverberated through the station, like a collective whisper that sent shivers down their spines. And then, from the darkness, they heard the unmistakable sound of dozens of footsteps echoing in unison. Something in the shadows was moving, something far worse than they had ever anticipated. The Vrexel were only the beginning. The figure standing in the center of the room finally stepped into the light. The dim glow revealed a person, human or at least what once was. Their skin was pale, their eyes hollow and wild, and their clothes were torn and stained. The faintest whisper of blood streaked their mouth. Their movements were slow, deliberate, but there was an unsettling intelligence in the way they turned to face the squad. You shouldn't have come, the figure repeated, their voice rasping. They're awake now. Who are you? Nadia demanded, her glaive at the ready, her stance tense. The figure grinned, a broken smile that didn't reach their eyes. I was one of the researchers. Dr. Ilara Dorn. The name sounded familiar, but Elias couldn't place it. You're the one who worked on the dark matter project? Kayla asked, her tone colder now, her hand tightening on her sniper rifle. What happened here? What did you? The scream that ripped through the air silenced them. It came from deeper within the station, a guttural alien wail that sent a chill down Elias's spine. And then the shuffling sound. Like something dragging itself, dragging an impossibly heavy weight. Dr. Dorn's face twisted into something closer to a grimace, a mixture of terror and sorrow. You don't understand. We didn't just study dark matter. She staggered a step forward, the strain in her movements increasing. We tried to control it. And now it controls us. Another scream echoed, this time much closer. The squad turned in unison, weapons raised. From the shadows, strange shapes emerged, shambling forms, their bodies long since mutilated, but their eyes burning with an unnatural hunger. Their movements were jerky, like marionettes controlled by unseen hands, and their grotesque, disfigured bodies seemed to sway in the dim light. They weren't just human anymore. Zombified? Nadia muttered under her breath. What the hell did they do here? Arjun's face was stone. The Vrexel didn't just attack this station. They altered it. The scientist's voice grew softer, more desperate. Not just the Vrexel. The dark matter, it did something to us. Changed us. And now the experiments, they're awake. They're feeding. Before anyone could react, one of the figures charged, moving faster than expected for something with half its body missing. It lunged toward Dr. Dorn, but a precise shot from Kayla's sniper rifle tore through the air, blowing the creature's head clean off. Move? Arjun barked, pulling them into motion. They couldn't wait for an explanation. They needed to survive. The squad ran deeper into the station, the groaning of metal and distant screams echoing in the halls. Elias's heart hammered in his chest as the corridor stretched on endlessly, and the sound of shuffling footsteps grew louder. These creatures were everywhere now, spreading like a tide, chasing them down with a ravenous hunger. Arjun, what the hell do we do now? Nadia yelled, glancing over her shoulder as a few more of the deformed figures emerged from side rooms. Arjun didn't hesitate. We find the data vault. We get the information. If this is what I think it is, it's humanity's chance to end the Vrexel threat. We have to retrieve it. Kayla, always the realist, snapped her attention to the hallway ahead. We're not getting anywhere like this. We're gonna be swarmed. We need to secure our exit. Elias felt a tight knot of anxiety in his chest. They were cornered in a crumbling research facility, with half-mad, mutated humans and whatever horrors the dark matter experiments had unleashed closing in on them. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to hide, nowhere to go. Stay focused, Arjun said, as though sensing the doubt creeping into their minds. Kayla, take point. Nadia, cover her. Elias, with me. We'll keep pushing forward. Stay tight. We'll make it to the vault. Understood, Kayla responded without a hint of hesitation, her cool professionalism cutting through the tension. Just keep those things off my back. The squad moved quickly, slipping through the winding hallways of the station. They could feel the air thick with the stench of decay, the walls lined with the twisted remnants of a failed experiment. Elias could feel the oppressive weight of something in the air, a thick, invisible pressure that felt as if it were closing in on them with every passing moment. Suddenly, the hallway ahead of them erupted with noise. The shuffling, dragging creatures were closing in fast. They were everywhere, pouring from every crevice, their eyes wild with a hunger that transcended anything human. "Get ready," Arjun shouted. "Hold your ground." Kayla didn't hesitate. She set up her position by the door leading into the vault room, taking out a plasma grenade and tossing it into the mass of oncoming horrors. The explosion sent bodies flying, but the creatures were relentless, reforming and pushing forward with even greater ferocity. "Elias!" Arjun shouted, pulling him to the side as a creature lunged at them. Elias raised his rifle and fired, the shot ringing out in the chaos. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, they made it to the vault. The door was sealed with a coded lock, the light above it flashing red. "Kayla, we need that door open," Arjun snapped. Without a word, Kayla advanced, her mechanical hands working quickly to override the security system. Time was running out. The sound of the horde was deafening now, a chorus of unnatural wails and screams. "Got it?" Kayla exclaimed as the door slid open. The squad rushed inside, just as a monstrous roar rang out from the hallway behind them. They slammed the door shut, breathing heavily, heartbeats thundering in their ears. Inside, the data vault was eerily quiet. Rows of glowing data chips and hard drives lined the walls, an archive of knowledge, and possibly humanity's salvation. Elias could feel the weight of history in the air as Arjun began accessing the primary terminals. "Start extracting data," Arjun ordered. "We need to get everything on the Vrexel and these dark matter experiments. This station's gone, but this data is our lifeline." Elias nodded, but his mind was racing. The figures outside, the wailing of the mutated scientists, it wasn't just an invasion anymore. It was a warning. The dark matter was far worse than they could have ever imagined. Whatever was coming for them, it was already here. The question was, how long until it broke through that door? The door to the vault slammed shut with a finality that made the air in the room feel thick, almost suffocating. Elias's heart was still pounding from the frantic run through the station, and the distant, terrifying shrieks of the creatures that had once been human echoed in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still to come. Inside the vault, the flickering light from the data terminals cast strange shadows across the room, making the walls seem like they were closing in. Arjun's fingers flew over the keyboard, while Kayla kept watch, her sniper rifle poised and ready. Nadia and Elias stood at the door, weapons aimed, eyes constantly scanning for any sign of movement. The silence inside was suffocating, except for the constant whir of Arjun's terminal as he downloaded the data. Elias could hear the faint sounds of the horde outside, their snarls and the gnashing of teeth rattling against the door, as if they were testing the barrier between them. But for now they were safe. The data, humanity's only hope against the Vrexel, was within reach. "We're almost there," Arjun muttered, his eyes flicking rapidly between the screens. His brow furrowed in concentration as the data continued to download. This could change everything. But Elias didn't feel any sense of victory. Not yet. Not when there was a storm of horror waiting just beyond the door, ready to sweep them away. His mind was already racing ahead, calculating their next move. "They're getting closer," Kayla said, her voice tight with tension. "We need to move." "We can't leave until we've secured the data," Arjun replied. "The compact needs this. We need this." Suddenly, the air seemed to grow even colder, a strange, palpable pressure that made the hairs on the back of Elias's neck stand up. Something was off. Something that had nothing to do with the terrifying creatures outside or the station's dim, decaying atmosphere. "Arjun, hurry it up," Nadia said, her voice strained. "Something's not right." Arjun didn't answer, his focus too sharp on the terminal to be distracted. The download bar on the screen was almost full, but Elias couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. The door began to shake. First, it was a subtle vibration, almost imperceptible. But then, the shaking grew more intense, like something massive was pushing against it from the other side. Elias's blood ran cold. The creatures had been relentless, but they weren't this strong. They couldn't be. "Get ready," Arjun warned, but his voice was laced with uncertainty now. "They're not just coming for us, they've broken through." A deep, growling sound rumbled through the metal door. A scraping as if claws were dragging themselves over it. Elias's pulse quickened. What the hell was that? He glanced toward the others. Kayla was still focused on the door, her gun aimed at the crack where the door met the frame. Nadia was pacing, the tension in her posture unbearable. Only Arjun seemed calm, his fingers steady despite the looming threat. But then the sound stopped. The pressure on the door vanished. For a moment, Elias thought it was a trick, some kind of silence before the storm. But then the terminal beeped, and Arjun turned to them, his face pale but determined. "We've got it," he said. "The data's secure. Let's move." "Move?" Kayla snapped, her voice biting. "We've still got a horde outside. And something's still messing with the door." Elias didn't have time to question Kayla's instincts. Arjun was right, the data was their priority, but now that they had it, their chances of surviving hinged on getting back to the dropship. Arjun glanced at the door, his eyes narrowing. "We need a way out. Now." They were about to make their move when the door suddenly exploded inward. A monstrous figure, impossibly tall and disfigured, stood in the entryway, its grotesque form barely fitting through the doorway. The creature was a twisted amalgamation of flesh and metal, a mockery of what had once been human. It was something out of a nightmare, a creation not of the Vrexel but of the dark matter itself. Elias barely had time to react before the creature let out an unearthly screech. It charged toward them, its massive limbs swinging with terrifying speed. The air around it shimmered as though reality itself was bending, warping in its presence. "Fall back," Arjun shouted. The squad scrambled toward the rear of the vault, weapons firing. Kayla's sniper rounds hit the creature, but it barely flinched. Nadia's glaive lashed out, but it missed as the creature swatted her aside like a rag doll. Elias fired his weapon, but the shots didn't seem to penetrate its thick, warped hide. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed Nadia's arm and yanked her to her feet, ignoring the pain shooting up his spine as the force of the creature's swipe had nearly knocked her out cold. "We need to run," he shouted. But the creature was fast. Faster than any of them had anticipated. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, flared with a sickly light, and it let out another screech, the sound vibrating through their skulls. "We can't outrun it," Kayla hissed, her voice trembling with something Elias had never heard before: fear. The creature lunged again, its claws cutting through the air with unnatural precision. This time it caught Arjun's shoulder, dragging him to the ground. He gritted his teeth and fired his sidearm, but the creature's other arm shot forward, slamming him into the wall with a sickening crack. "Arjun?" Elias shouted, adrenaline flooding his veins. But there was no time. The squad had no time to mourn or pause for even a second. "Get him?" Nadia screamed. "We need to keep moving. Now." Kayla and Elias worked quickly, dragging Arjun's unconscious form away from the beast. The creature was focused on them now, and the sound of its claws scraping against the floor was deafening. "We can't fight it," Kayla said, her voice steady despite the panic in her eyes. "We need an exit." Elias glanced at the data terminal. There was no time to access the external systems. "Blast the walls," Kayla ordered. "We need to make an exit. Now." Nadia's eyes locked onto the nearby wall. She didn't hesitate. Her plasma grenade flew through the air, landing with a soft hiss against the metal wall. She hit the detonator. The explosion ripped through the station, sending debris flying and creating a hole wide enough for them to escape. "Go. Now," Kayla shouted. Elias picked up Arjun's limp form, throwing him over his shoulder, and bolted through the opening, Nadia and Kayla right behind him. The dark matter creature screeched from behind them, its rage palpable. But for the first time since landing on Pixis 87, Elias could see the stars again. The dropship was waiting just ahead. They had the data. They had survived. But Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The galaxy wasn't ready for what they had just uncovered. And neither were they. The dropship's engines roared to life as Elias and the squad scrambled aboard, the open hatch barely wide enough to let them slip through before the darkness consumed them. The sound of the creature's screeches echoed behind them, reverberating through the ruins of Pixis 87, but Elias didn't dare look back. The dropship's thrusters engaged, lifting them into the air, and within moments the station that had once been humanity's beacon in the dark was nothing more than a faint memory, receding into the cold void of space. The ship's interior was eerily silent. They'd made it out. But at what cost? Arjun was unconscious, his arm nearly torn off by the creature's claws. Kayla and Nadia were bruised and bloody but alive. Elias was bruised as well, inside and out. They had retrieved the data, yes, but something had shifted in him during their escape. That creature, that abomination created by dark matter, it was only the beginning. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. "We're not out of the woods yet," Kayla said as she checked her weapons and readied her gear. That thing wasn't alone. We have no idea what else they might have unleashed. Elias nodded, gripping the seat in front of him. The data was securely stowed, but the information it contained was still unknown. All he knew was that the dark matter experiments were not just a threat to humanity, they were a key to defeating the Vrexel, but in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The Vrexel were not just an alien species, they were a symptom of something much worse. The real enemy wasn't foreign invaders. It was the forces of the universe itself. As the dropship ascended, Elias pulled out the small data drive containing the mission's most precious cargo. It pulsed with an eerie glow, its significance far beyond any single battle, far beyond even the Vrexel. It held the key to the next evolution of human warfare, but it also carried the weight of a devastating truth. The compact needs this, Arjun said hoarsely from his position on the medical bed, his voice laced with pain but determination. We need to take this to them. Elias glanced back at him, his thoughts scattered. If the data's right, then the Vrexel aren't the only thing we're facing. Dark matter can give us the tools to fight them, sure. But it also holds the potential for catastrophe. I'm not sure the compact will understand that. We don't have a choice, Arjun shot back, his voice strained. We have to trust that they can figure it out. They need this knowledge to fight back. Humanity's only hope is to fight fire with fire. If dark matter can stop the Vrexel, we use it. No matter what the cost. Nadia was quiet, her eyes scanning the stars outside the viewport. There's always a cost, Arjun. Always. And what happens when we don't control it? When it controls us? Elias felt the weight of her words. They were leaving the unknown dangers of Pixis 87 behind, but the galaxy was still full of threats. The dark matter wasn't the only thing they had to contend with. And as much as humanity relied on its adaptability, Elias had learned one painful truth during the mission. Some things couldn't be controlled. Just make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of Pixis 87, Kayla muttered. The compact might not be ready for what we just brought back. They've only seen the tip of the iceberg. Elias glanced down at the data drive again. The blinking light was almost hypnotic. It's a dangerous weapon, Elias said quietly. And we might not be able to put it back in the box once we open it. For a long moment no one spoke. It wasn't fear that held them silent. It was the awareness of what lay ahead, of how much was at stake. They were humanity's greatest warriors, forged in the fires of Starlight, but even they knew that they were out of their depth. What the dark matter could do to the Vrexel, it could also do to them. There was no easy answer. There was no guarantee of survival. As the dropship hurtled through the stars, its destination clear, the weight of their mission pressed down on them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about understanding a force that could reshape the entire galaxy, either as a weapon of salvation or as an unstoppable disaster. Set a course for the compact, Elias said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. It's time to find out if they can handle what we've brought them. And if they can't, we'll have to be ready to make the hard choice. The crew nodded in silent agreement, and the dropship sped toward its destination. There were no easy answers, no clear path ahead. But they had survived Pixis 87, and they had retrieved the data. Whatever came next, they would face it together, warriors forged in the fires of Starlight, against an enemy greater than any they had ever known. But humanity had survived worse before. And if anyone could overcome the darkness, it would be them.